And who am I? That's not a secret I'll never tell. You know you love me. XOXO. Gossip Girl.
What's up? We got Gossip Girl season 5, episode 2, Beauty and the Feast. This episode starts off with Blair in the obstetrician's office with the icon Dorota, who's about to have a checkup. Blair begins asking questions and beginning with whether the doctor is required, has a reputation. The doctor comes in and Blair begins asking questions about pregnancy and pretends to ask for Dorota, who lets her go until Blair determines who the father is because Dorota doesn't know. It's of course Vanya. Like, who else would it be? What do you mean Dorota doesn't know? It has to be Vanya. It's not like Dorota cheated on Vanya with another man. It has to be Vanya. The doctor suggests Dorota come back alone another time because, Blair's and leaves. After he's gone, Dorota realizes Miss Blair is the one that's pregnant. Is not asking for herself and is not asking for Dorota. Blair is asking for herself, and Blair's pregnant. Blair begs her not to say anything, and at the Empire, Chuck is reading a tabloid about Blair and Louis when he notices a girl leaving Nate's room. Disappointed when he wasn't able to perform, Nate admits that he can't stop thinking about that British girl he slept with in L.A. Chuck informs Nate that Anne has been trying to call him, all day with Anne offering to help with his future, and he encourages Dan to call his mom back. At the loft, Dan tries to figure out which publisher has his book, and his only due is to check Vanessa sent him. He unsuccessfully tries to log into her bank account and decides to call Serena, who's still in Los Angeles, for help. He reminds her that of all the time she broke into Lily's safe at the bank with Chuck and asks if she has any tips. She explains that Chuck slept with a girl at the bank, and Dan asks if she asked him for advice. Dan asks if she's really still in LA, and Serena says that she has a great job, and that Charlie / Ivy is there too, and she's on her way to Mir for lunch. After they hang up, Dan uses, I'll be using the slash, because when Serena mentions Charlie, she's actually talking about Ivy, so I have to put the slash there whenever they're talked about. Dan uses the Gossip Girl spy map to find Chuck at Ivy's apartment in LA. She's stressing over meeting with Serena and asks her boyfriend Max which shoes scream New York trust women maybe more. He says a friend of his has moved to Portland, Oregon, and they should too, as it's cheaper and maybe they'll be more successful there as they aren't succeeding in LA. Ivy encourages him not to give up, and things will work out for them soon. At the Waldorf, Louis says he wishes Blair could come with him back to Monaco for the feast. Beatrice arrives and hugs Blair, who becomes nauseated by her perfume. Blair mentions that Beatrice offers to give her her bottle. They sit down to eat in LA. Ivy / Charlie and Serena are having lunch. She asks about her friends and boyfriends, but Ivy says she has none. Ivy / Charlie says she has none, and then drops the bomb saying she's staying in LA to continue working for her boss. Back in New York, Blair says it's too bad Beatrice had to leave before they could bond. Beatrice announces that she moved their flight to that evening so that she can hang out with her all day. Blair is about to throw up, so she excuses herself. And this kind of tips off Beatrice. Back in LA, Serena's about to meet with a realtor to look at an apartment. She suggests the realtor can meet her at Ivy's apartment, but Ivy / Charlie says no. No, that's not happening. She can meet her boyfriend. The boyfriend can expose her identity. Then she would have to come up with an even bigger lie. She obviously doesn't want to have to come up. Then the realtor calls Serena and tells her that she's now interested in looking at bedroom apartment. In New York, Dan is looking for Chuck and finds him in an alleyway with two guys. Chuck instructs the man to ignore Dan and they begin shoving him. Dan asks to call the cops and the guys bail, saying it wasn't what they signed up for. Chuck puts his shirt back on and Dan sees injury from the motorcycle accident. At the Empire, Nate is making pop brownies and successfully tries to find any information about the British woman from LA. Dan and Chuck arrive and Dan tells Nate about what he saw in the alley, about the guys and the injury. Dan suspects it has something to do with Blair, but Nate says it's not because Chuck says he's fine about it. Nate offers to have his mom send over the concierge doctor, but then he realizes he'll have to pick up an internship. He decides to anyway and tells Chuck, who just says it's an excellent before taking a brownie. Nate tells Dan he'll call him after the doctor. Outside, Nate and Beatrice are doing some light shopping while walking. Beatrice tells Blair about the mandate dress code. At this point, Blair wonders how she'll become a style icon if she isn't allowed much choice in her wardrobe. Beatrice replies that being allowed to wear that what she wants is perks of being a non-ring sibling. Blair says it's surprised to hear her say that, as when Louis gave up his position briefly a few days ago, the few days were too much pressure for her, and Blair is more suited for that sort of lifestyle. She suggests that they stop for a snack, and Blair has to excuse herself to be sick. Back in LA, Serena and Ivy/Charlie are looking at an apartment on the beach. Ivy/Charlie says there isn't enough closet space, and Serena argues that I think it's gonna thunderstorm. Oh no, but I think there's thunder outside. Serena says that she has a whole room for shoot alone. Ivy retorts that the Ivy/Charlie retorts that the beach traffic might depress her and then her roommate, so she should stay where she is. The realtor says if they want it, they need to make a decision now, and Serena says she can do a down payment that day. She stops when she realizes she doesn't have her checkbook, but remembers that Ivy/Charlie has hers. When Ivy/Charlie, which I'm going to have to refer to her that until Ivy gets revealed. So Ivy/Charlie hesitates. Serena asks if that's her way of saying that she doesn't want to live with her. Not only her feeling, Ivy/Charlie writes an out-of-state check from one of the real Charlie trust fund checkbooks. At the Empire, the concierge doctor tells Chuck that his fractured ribs are nothing to mess around about, and Chuck insists that they don't hurt and walks away. The doctor admits to Nate that Chuck's condition is bordering on dangerous, and that if he's self-medicating, someone needs to be watching him closely. At the Waldorf, Blair and Beatrice arrive back from shopping. Blair immediately accuses herself to the bathroom, and Dorota offers to show Beatrice the door. Beatrice announces to Dorota that she thinks Blair has a drug problem, and Dorota, being the icon she is, says no, that's not the case, citing that Blair is just too much of a control freak to use drugs. Beatrice then guesses Blair has an eating disorder, and Dorota says no, and that she used to but doesn't have one anymore, and leaves to make tuna. And then she leaves to make tuna milk. When she's gone, Beatrice calls Louis and says they need to speak right away. Outside the Archibald townhouse, Nate sees the British woman from LA, and he gets excited and says she can't believe she tracked him down. She says Borderline is adorable, but she was there to see Anne Archibald, as she wanted an interview with her. Wanted to interview her for an inaugural article for the newly acquired newspaper, The Spectator. However, Anne declined. Elsewhere, Louis decides demands to know what was so important to Beatrice to discuss now, and she explains she thinks Blair has bulimia, but Louis doesn't believe her. He explains that Blair told him all about having it as a teenager, but doesn't have it anymore. Beatrice insists that she does and says that she'll prove it to him. Back in LA, Ivy tells the realtor to get her check, but is told the check was invalid and that person to talk to would be Serena. Meanwhile, with Louis and Beatrice are gone, Blair goes back down to bed. Dora brings her saltine cracker. She also mentions to Blair that now that they're gone, she has time to figure out what they're going to do. Louis then enters the bedroom, followed by Beatrice. He explains that Beatrice doesn't want her to miss her first holiday, and Beatrice finishes by saying that she had a pre-smooth celebration in New York at a local church. She also mentions that Blair called it a feast for very good reason. Dan arrives at the Empire to see Chuck. He asks for his help, but Chuck says no, that he's going out. Dan tells him not to, and that Blair's attention isn't worth punching along. But Chuck says he isn't interested in Blair's attention. Dan says she's over Chuck, especially since he was the last person she kissed before Louis. However, Chuck lets slip to Dan that the last person Blair was just before she left Louis was himself. Back in California, Ivy goes to see Max and says that she decides that she wants to go to Portland after all. She says that if they stay there, nothing will happen but if they go, Max has a chance to make his dreams come true. He agrees right away and says he'll quit when the manager comes back from break. Ivy says she's going to go home and pack and leave. At the feast, Beatrice, Louis, and Blair arrive. Louis introduces Blair to Father Cavalier, the one who will marry them. He says that he wants to get to know Blair and asks about her religious background. Surrounded by food, Blair begins to become nauseated. Beatrice suggests Blair try one of her favorite food, a pastry filled with pumpkins, spices, and butter. Blair has a tiny bit, but then spots Dan. She gives herself to go talk to him, and Beatrice says she can't even keep down one bite of food. Louis says she's starting to sound like their mom, but Beatrice says she's just looking out for Louis and his well-being. Blair talks to Dan, who tells her about Chuck, but she asks him to walk with her. Outside the Archibald townhouse, the British woman from LA finds Nate, who finds out that her name is Diana Payne. Diana says she hopes that the text from her to come back was actually from Anne, but it read that she had decided she could be interviewed. Nate says it was real, but a few details need to be worked out. Diane suspects that Anne would work at the tabloid, but would be assured it's not. Nate asks if he's going to get a finder's fee for convincing her to do it, and to escape Smile Alley to sleep together and have sex. In California, Ivy arrives back to her apartment to find Serena waiting. She decides to go back. Ivy / Charlie says she knows what really happened with the money. At the feast, Blair heads into the restroom with Dan in tow and kicks everyone out. Dan asks what's going on, if what's going on has to do with her sleeping with Chuck, and Blair's surprised she knows about that. Blair says Chuck told her to marry Louis and he meant it, and that's whatever he's doing isn't to get her attention. She orders Dan to guard the door and heads into the stall and proceeds to throw up. But Beatrice enters the room and Dan says she has to leave as Blair is sick. Beatrice goes to get Louis and then Blair comes out and washes her hands. Dan suspects it's bulimic, but Blair denies it. Dan blocks her from leaving and says she can't leave until she agrees to get help. Frustrated, Blair reveals her pregnancy to Dan, but realizes that after Beatrice also overheard, she gets it up with her and begs her not to say anything to Louis because it's still too early. Louis comes over and asks what Blair was going to tell him. Beatrice jumps in and says that Blair suggests they let the homeless come and dine with them. Blair corrects her and says not eat with them, but to be served like a soup kitchen. Louis agrees that it's a wonderful idea, but Dan gets a gossip girl blast about Chuck looking to get beat up again. He leaves, but not before Blair reminds him not to tell anyone. He agrees not to and says that she can't hide it forever. In LA, Serena goes to the check that must have gone through because Carol cut her off. Ivy/Charlie hesitantly agrees and says that she told her mom that she wanted to make it on her own. Serena's looking at a small apartment, and Ivy/Charlie has to come live with her. She tells her that Cece can call the bank and make it so Carol can't cut her off again. Serena says that she has to go meet with her boss, but she'll pick her up right after they're done, and they should pack. Uh-oh, Ivy, you might have to continue being Charlie for much longer than you thought, because you want to leave with your boyfriend, but Serena coming back was unexpected to you, Ivy. So, what are you gonna do? Dan goes to find Chuck, and Glenn finds him in the alley getting beat up. One of the guys punches Dan, and Chuck told them not to let anything interrupt them. Dan yells at Chuck and makes them stop, and does so. The guys leave, and Dan asks if this has to do with Blair. Chuck admits it doesn't. It has to do with his sudden inability to feel anything. Elsewhere, Diana and Nate walk around. Diana offers him an internship at The Spectator, and that someone with his persuasiveness skills would make a great in marketing or similar field. She kisses him and walks off. At the Empire, Nate figures out what Chuck is feeling is a form of PTSD, which results in the lack of not being able to feel after experiencing psychological trauma. He advises Chuck to seek help or try to feel good things instead of pain. Chuck asks what help Dan needed, and Dan explains that his novel that he wrote is the no one should be able to read, being really thanks to Vanessa, and he needs to find a publisher she sold to so he can stop it, and Chuck agrees to help. In LA, Ivy is packing when Max comes home and says that his friend Jason will let them crash till they get their own plate. Ivy says she can't go, and that's what's really making her happen in LA isn't LA, but Max. She receives a text from Serena saying she's waiting downstairs, then breaks up with Max and leaves. Back in New York, Beatrice is in a limo with Father Cavia and says her plans to take down Blair didn't work, as she wants to get Louis out of Monaco for good. She then begins kissing the priest, who reveals that they are working together all along. In LA, Ivy/Charlie meets Serena downstairs and says her meeting with her boss was about transferring her back to her New York office, and says she wants Ivy/Charlie to come with her. Ivy/Charlie skeptically agrees to go. So yeah, again, Ivy's gonna have to continue being Charlie for who knows how long now. Blair goes to see Dan at the loft and admits that he is the only one who can emotionally load conversations with. She asks how Chuck is, and Dan says he's okay, but he hasn't told Louis because it might be. Asks if she hasn't told Louis because it might be Chuck. Blair says by the sheer law of probability, it's more likely Louis. Dan reminds her that there still might be a chance, and Blair replies that she can't be this close to having all of her dreams come true, just to have them yanked away one time. He encouraged her to find out who the father is, and she asks what she would do if she loses everything, and Dan says she'll have him, ending the episode. So yeah, Ivy's gonna now go back to New York and continue with her Charlie persona. That's why I'll have to continue saying Ivy/Charlie or Charlie Ivy, because yeah, I don't want to confuse the two. So yeah, so Ivy's being forced back into her Ivy/Charlie persona by Serena, and is coming back to New York to live with her, unknowing that she has a secret that her cousin isn't really her cousin, and that her real cousin doesn't even know who Serena is. Meanwhile, what happens is that Chuck's gonna help Dan find a way how to kill his book that Vanessa's trying to publish. Blair, Beatrice suspects Blair of knows Blair's pregnant, but they decide not to tell Louis because she doesn't know if it's even Blair's baby, if it's even Louis' baby, because she also slept with Chuck, so it could be his. She also slept with Louis, but she also slept with Chuck, so I don't know. Diane was meeting with someone, was speaking with someone that was in the last episode, saying that she thought that she was going to meet Nate in New York. So, who is she speaking to? And it seems like she already knew who Nate was before she met him. Who knows? And it's thundering outside, which is very concerning. But, yeah. And Chuck is getting himself beat up so he can actually feel something in his life. So, yeah. But that's season 5, episode 2. Beauty and the Feast. And that's it for this video. And I'll see you next time for season 5, episode 3, Jewel of Denial. Jewel of Denial. What's gonna happen? I guess Ivy and Serena are going back to New York. Blair's gonna have to figure out gonna figure out who her baby belongs to. And Dorota's pregnant, but Blair said that Dorota doesn't know who the father is. Wouldn't it be Vanya? And Nate has gotten himself a job. But anyway, that's it for this video. And I'll see you next time for season 5, episode 3, Jewel of Denial. You know you love me. XOXO, Gossip Girl.